So that Senate primary has also captured national attention as Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff aims for re-election.
Yeah, right now it looks like, as I check the board over there, Mike Collins is in front. The real battle is between Derek Dooley and Buddy Carter right now. Dooley is in second place, 28% of the vote. Carter, 26% of the vote. Liz and Chris, still a long way to go there. But right now it looks like Collins is safe for the runoff, and it still waits to determine whether it'll be Dooley or Carter.
Any thoughts on that, Dr. Lawrence, about which of the two might be in the runoff with Collins?
I think a lot of people were, expecting that, it would be a Carter-Collins situation. But, obviously, Derek Dooley has really seemed to have pulled it out to some extent. Now, we'll see if that in the final numbers plays out, and in which case I think that's, definitely a testimony to, Brian Kemp's ability to endorse a candidate, right? He had... that was one of the big questions was, did Brian Kemp have any coattails in this race? And, with Dooley being his handpicked candidate, if he can get into the runoff and then convert that into the win, I think that might vindicate his strategy.
Are you surprised that Governor Kemp didn't make more endorsements?
A little bit. I think he's trying to sort of navigate, what sort of role he's going to play in the party going forward. Obviously, he's not on, Donald Trump's Christmas card list. And so, and at the same time, right, he also wants to define himself in opposition to Democrats, Keisha Lance Bottoms and, others, Stacey Abrams most famously, right? And so he's trying to figure out, navigate that sort of pathway, and I think keeping himself limited perhaps and trying to avoid some of those missteps, I think, is what he's kind of trying to do at the moment.
We got some good look at the numbers for the lieutenant governor's race, at least on the Republican side. John F. Kennedy, 27% of the vote. Next person down, Dolezal, 25% of the vote. Looks like they could be headed for a runoff depending on how the results come in. What do you think John F. Kennedy, the local candidate here, needs to do to get more traction statewide?
I think that, a challenge for anybody in this race, right, is that name recognition statewide, right? None of them have really had statewide office. They've been prominent in the legislature, but unless you pay a lot of attention to the legislature, you may not necessarily know much about Kennedy or Dolezal or, for that matter, Blake Tillery or some of those other candidates, right? And so I think what he's got to do over the next 4 weeks is really sort of introduce himself to voters outside of, the Macon area and, people that are used to voting for him, in Macon and Warner Robins to, get into that Metro Atlanta market and really sort of, advance his message with the Republican primary base.
And it's going to be interesting, too, when we head into the special session for redistricting in Georgia with some real lame ducks, in the building. But how do you think that is going to go down?
I think that's really kind of be interesting to watch, right? Because they got two things they got to do, right? The first thing they've got to straighten out is the QR code thing for the ballots in November, right? And I think that's a non-negotiable point, at this point, right? Because I don't think they want the courts involved in that. But the other question is going to be, can they get a redistricting plan through the legislature that, helps Republicans win, like in Sanford Bishop's district? In 2028, right? Because this would not take effect until 2028. But we saw in South Carolina, for example, that their governor called a special session and tried to do very much the same thing with a majority black district there, and the state senate there balked, right? They said, we're not doing that. And so he's going to call another session to see if he can get it through again, right? And so the question is, is the legislature going to play along with what the governor is trying to push for here? And that's kind of an open question, particularly, as you said, with so many lame ducks, so many people that are not going to be returning next year.
People are paying attention to the courts, too, as well, as we see more of the judiciary playing a role in making decisions that affect politicians and affect our lives. So anything stand out to you about the Supreme Court races here in Georgia?
I think that the Democrats were really trying to flex their muscles in those two state Supreme Court cases in particular, right? Trying to push those two challengers in those races, Jordan and the other candidate, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but Miracle, whatever her name was. I apologize, but I feel like that they even though they were able to get more turnout in the primary, it looks like the numbers from the Secretary of State are showing that the Democrats had a pretty big edge in terms of the number of ballots that were polled. That didn't really translate into winning those two races, and so now, maybe they win one of them. One of the two races is a little tighter, but. I mean, I definitely see, obviously there's a lot of interest in those races, but were the Democrats able to convert there? It doesn't seem like that at the moment.
You were trying to recall Miracle Rankin.
Rankin,
Were you
yes.
surprised that they campaigned together? I'd never really seen that before.
That was a little unusual. In fact, there was that was the basis of a judicial watchdog complaint, essentially, against them. One of the rules for the Judicial Qualifications Commission in Georgia is that judicial candidates are not supposed to appear with or endorse other candidates, and so that landed them in a little bit of hot water. And that's probably why you don't see that very often. Now the question is, I think an important question is, does that violate their First Amendment rights to campaign and that sort of thing? That's something that may, even if this race is settled, the court, there may be a court challenge to, that sort of gag order, if you will, on judicial candidates that may lead to more partisan, more explicitly political court races in the future here in Georgia.
And I could see somebody capitalizing on that and say, hey, these are supposed to be the top legal minds and they can't even follow the rules.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll have to see how everything plays out tonight. The suspense is killing me, right, Frank and Lori?
Liz and Chris, thank you so much. Fascinating conversation.
Oh, yeah, and to think in 4 weeks, a lot of these races will still be going on because we'll just have narrowed the field down a little bit 4 weeks from tonight. We're back.